Let's talk about Solaris and a quick little getting started with it and how we can actually go about starting to use it. So I started using Solaris a lot more in Houdini 20, so I wanted to cover just kind of what methods people may use to work with it, and then also kind of what I think the best way is to work with it. So first off, the first thing that you're going to want to do is actually create geometry inside of Solaris. So there's a couple different ways that you can do this. You can either bring everything, you can start in the normal build context here, and you can build everything in SOPs in your geometry containers, and then you can come over to your Solaris and you can use a SOP import, and you can import in all of your geometry. Or you can even do, there's scene import, so you can import everything from there as well. Personally, I don't think that this is the best way to work inside of Solaris, and I'm going to tell you why. Because the second way that you go about creating geometry in Solaris is with a simple SOP create. And it's basically the same thing, but it's all in one node. So once you dive into this node, it's basically like working inside of the normal build or the SOPs context. So you have access to all of your different SOPs, so like mountain nodes or like your sphere, all of your different polygons and primitives and all that stuff. You have access to all of your SOPs inside of this SOP create. And I think that this is the best way to work. So let's go ahead and drop down our sphere. Let's just drop this down to start off with, and it doesn't really matter, but I'm going to increase frequency and just make a match size and make it sit on the origin here. And then we can also drop down a grid, and we can merge these together. So once I've merged these together, let's go ahead and just go back up to the stage context here. And once we have this, we need to understand a couple of other things. So what are we looking at here? We have basically this is the parameters that we had before, and this is our network view, obviously. And then we have this area, which is kind of new. This is like the scene graph and kind of like sort of like a geometry spreadsheet type of area for the stage context. So in here, if we twirl down that little plus icon next to that, we have our scene, and in here we have our SOP create. So if I go ahead and rename this, I can call this whatever I want. We'll just call this like geo. And you can see that it renames that here in our scene tree. I'm going to go ahead and undo that just to demonstrate something here in a minute. But we have another thing below this, and that is our actual mesh. So we have a couple of different things here, and they're all lumped into one mesh. And why is that? Well, that is because it doesn't know how to break things up by default. You have to do something, which I'll show you here in a minute. But by default, it doesn't understand how to break up your meshes. So it's going to lump everything into one singular mesh. And if we come over to our import from SOPs over here and twirl down this primitive definitions, we have this path attributes. And this by default tells Houdini how to like separate out the objects in your scene or in your SOP create. So if they have this attribute, and by default it's going to use the path and the name attributes. So if it has these attributes with a string attached to them, it will break them up into different meshes over here. So let's go ahead and just show that. So let's dive in here and let's just create an attribute create. And one thing to note with this is these attributes are primitive attributes. So if we change this to name and we make this a string, we can call this sphere. And then we can make a duplicate of this and we can call this grid. And if I jump back up here, I forgot to change these to our primitive attributes. So let's actually just look at that real quick. So you see it's not recognizing them because it's not on the primitives. So they're still named mesh 0. So let's change these over to primitives. And if I jump up here now, we see that we now have 2 individual meshes in our scene tree here. So if we put a slash in front of these, we can basically break these down, or we can rename kind of where they're going to be placed. So if I put /geo, then another slash, and I do the same thing for our sphere. So /geo /sphere. I go back up here. You can see that we're essentially renaming the SOP create to this geo transform, or X form, I should say. And then if we want to change that even further, we can layer these into a subfolder. So we'll call this sub, and then /sub/grid. And you see now we have another X form there that has our grids inside of them. So you can kind of break things down even more inside of that. So that's super useful. That's one thing that you're definitely going to want to know how to do. But there's another thing that is pretty common, I would say, when you're working in the geometry context and the normal assigning materials and stuff. And that's assigning materials based off of groups. So by default, the groups are going to be recognized. So if we go ahead and come down here and we create a group, call this group 1 is fine. And let's just select some base primitives here. We'll just select those, and then maybe we select like the top half of our sphere here. Something like that. So it's not showing anything by default. We have to come into the import data and come down to subset groups. And we can import that group. So we have group 1. Now you see that we have a group 1 outline here inside of our scene graph. So now if we drop down a material library, let's just drop down a Karma material builder. We don't really need to do much in here. Let's just change this color to like blue just so we can see it. And then we drop down a material linker. Then we can take this Karma material. So this is actually how you create materials inside of Solaris as well. So you're going to want a material library, and then this material linker is super powerful. Lets you assign all of your materials all at once. So this can be like 2 of your last nodes in your tree. You can drop down a material library, build all of your materials in here, name them whatever you want, and then with the material linker, you can assign them to all your geometry. So if we just drag our material over here, and we twirl down our scene graph over here, we can take these and assign these to even individual groups inside of Karma. So now you can see it's already popped up that it is showing inside of the, it's only showing on the group, I should say. It's only assigned to the group that we have set. And we can assign multiple like that. If we want to delete them, we can come in here and we can just delete them out and apply, and then we're all good on that. Or if we want to assign it to a whole object, we can drag our whole sphere in there and we're all good with that. So that's another thing that is super common that you'd want to do inside of Solaris, that you would normally do inside of the geometry context. And if you wanted to actually start rendering, you can normally, you would want a camera and everything, but if you just want to start looking at stuff, you actually don't have to set any of that up. You can just come into your perspective, little drop down, and go to Karma XPU or Karma CPU, and you'd start getting a preview render of your materials. Now, obviously, you're not going to do that for final rendering, but I just wanted to cover how you can go about creating groups and kind of organizing your scenes, and then also how you create geometry inside of Solaris. Because I think that a lot of people just import everything from the geometry context, and I don't think that's the best workflow. It's extra steps, just dropping down, scene imports or the SOP imports, and just one by one and one, just going through and creating all those, when you can literally just do the same thing with the SOP create, and then you just are already in the Solaris context. Just save yourself a little bit of time, in my opinion. And it starts working with USD. You really don't need to know a lot about USD to work inside of Solaris. You see, we didn't really talk about what X forms are, what these all these different things are inside of USD, and it's really not that important to know if you're working by yourself. You're not working in a team or anything like that. There are some things that you will need to understand, but you can start working and creating things in there with a very limited knowledge of USD, or even really none at all, as long as you know kind of how to place things. So anyways, I just wanted to cover that real quick. Houdini 20 is making karma more and more prevalent, I feel. So I think it's at its best not trying to use the karma ROP and just working directly in Solaris, because there's a lot of things that are very powerful about Solaris, and that I think people will come to realize and really like once they start using it. So I will probably go over more of that in the future. If you guys are interested in seeing more, learning more about Solaris, make sure to let me know. I'll throw this project file up on Patreon just so that you guys can dig through it, and I'll leave some little notes in there as well if you guys are interested in that. So anyways, hopefully this helped you out. I do cover a lot of other things inside Houdini, so if you want to learn more about Houdini, then go ahead and check out those other videos on my channel. Anyways, thank you guys for watching, and have a good day.